What reason would that be for, in a shortened week, 4 days instead of 5, to have the biggest stock market gain in over 50 years? So I think that, to me, there's a sign. Hey, look, with all we've been down, I mean, we've never been hit. I don't know, has this country ever been hit like this? Probably not. 1917, but that was different and a different time. And frankly, Europe took the brunt of it. We didn't, but it was a terrible time also. But probably never been hit like this, right? Somebody was saying, in fact, I was speaking with Governor Cuomo about it because we were in New York City, a place we love, New York State, with the World Trade Center. And that was approximately 3,000 people. Well, we've doubled that in this same area. We've doubled that, more than double it, substantially more. And it's obviously going. We had our highest number yesterday and the day before. Okay, with all of this news, what would lead you to believe that we're going to have the best stock market week, shortened week, in 50 years? Almost broke the all-time record. You know what that is? That's a pent-up demand. Now, that's my opinion. The other thing is we're doing tremendous stimulus plans. And despite what you're reading, there's back and forth, but we are getting along with the Democrats. They want to see something happen. We have to help our workers. We have to help our small businesses. We have to help our restaurants. I think deductibility will be great for entertainment, restaurants, all of that. Look, I think with the stimulus, with the people, with what we've got going, with all of the things, we're going to be meeting with the airlines over the weekend. We have a great plan for the airlines. We've got to keep the airlines going. It's never been a great business, but it's a very vital business for the country. We're going to be meeting with Boeing. We're going to be meeting with a lot of companies that are great companies and were great companies a short while ago. I mean, we can't let anything happen to Boeing. It's, got so much potential. You talk about potential. Can anything have more potential than that? So we have a lot of very exciting things taking place. We have tremendous plans. We have tremendous stimulus. And I think we have a chance to do really well. So this quarter isn't the quarter I'm looking at. Third quarter, we start to think about it. And I think fourth quarter is going to be at a level that maybe we haven't seen before. I think our country, with the stimulus, with all that we've been through, we've learned a lot. Don't forget, we've learned about pandemics and epidemics. We've learned a tremendous amount. And with all that we've learned, as an example, we're making ventilators. We have thousands of them being delivered in the very near future. We have countries calling us, can we have ventilators? That would have been an unthinkable call. I wouldn't know what to say. They have people dying, but we needed them for ourselves. We have plenty before the surge. In New York, they need far fewer hospital rooms or far fewer hospital beds in particular than we thought. And I have to say, Dr. Birx told me that 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. Remember, you said, that number's too high. We don't need that many. And based on what she said and others, we did what we had to do. We actually gave the maximum. We built Javits. We sent the ship in. We then made the ship COVID because, there weren't a lot of people on the roads. You didn't have the accidents that we thought, other unrelated accidents. Nobody driving. Normally you have a lot of car accidents. You have a lot of motorcycle accidents. You have people going to the hospital. We didn't have that. We had almost none of it. So a lot of things have happened. I think we have a chance to be stronger than before. I really do. I think the stimulus is very important, what we're doing. I think it's very, very important. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, may I ask you about credit and debt as well?
Yeah.
Many American individuals, families have had to tap their credit cards during this period of time, and businesses have had to draw down their credit lines. Are you concerned, Mr. President, that may hobble the U.S. economy? All of that debt, number one. And number two, would you suggest to credit card companies to reduce their fees during this time?
Well, it's something that we've already suggested. We're talking to them. Business interruption insurance. I'd like to see these insurance companies. You have people that have paid. When I was in private, I had business interruption. When my business was interrupted through a hurricane or whatever it may be, I'd have business where I had it. I didn't always have it. Sometimes I had it. Sometimes I have a lot of different companies. But if I had it, I'd expect to be paid. You have people, I speak mostly to the restaurateurs, where they have a restaurant. They've been paying for 25, 30, 35 years, business interruption. They've never needed it. All of a sudden they need it. and I'm very good at reading language. I did very well in these subjects, okay? And I don't see the word pandemic mentioned. Now, in some cases it is. It's an exclusion. But in a lot of cases, I don't see it. I don't see reference, and they don't want to pay up. I would like to see the insurance companies pay if they need to pay, if it's fair. And they know what's fair, and I know what's fair. I can tell you very quickly. But business interruption insurance, that's getting a lot of money to a lot of people. And they've been paying for years. You know, sometimes they just started paying. But you have people that have never asked for business interruption insurance, and they've been paying a lot of money for a lot of years for the privilege of having it. And then when they finally need it, the insurance company says, we're not going to give it. We can't let that happen. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. On March 6th, you said anyone who wants tests can get a test. Now you're saying that you would be open to reopening the government without having a national testing system. How do you square those two statements, given that there are still issues with testing going forward? And how can you tell people that they're not going to have their lives put at risk?
I got it. There's not a lot, and it's a good question. There's not a lot of issues with testing. Certain sections of if we go to Iowa, we go to Nebraska, and interestingly, Idaho is very interesting because they had a few breakouts, small breakouts, but they're very, very capable states, and they're big distances, a lot of land, a lot of opening. You don't need testing there. You know, where you have a state with a small number of cases, some states with almost none. West Virginia hung in for a long time, as you know, with none for a long time. So when you have that, you don't need testing. You don't have to test every person in the state of Iowa, as an example. You don't have to test every single person to say, let's open up and let's get the tractors moving and let's get the corn and let's open up all of the different things they do in that great state. You don't need that. And with that being said, if there's a little hot corner someplace, we'll be testing. But I think Deborah speaks to this very well. The same thing in New York. That's what we talked to Governor Cuomo about this morning. We have the Abbott test, which is very quick and very easy, goes very fast. Then we have a lesser test that we talked about where we can talk about a larger area. But you're going to know. So we're going to do testing, but you don't need to test 325 to 350 million people because, number one, it's unnecessary. Vast numbers, vast areas of our country don't need this. I think you agree with me on that. You just don't need it. Now, we have certain hot spots. So Louisiana's a hot spot, New York's a hot spot, Detroit's a hot spot. And then you have certain areas in certain hot spots that you have to even go more so. And we're doing all of that. Remember this, we've done more testing than any country in the world. And we have the best test. And we developed this over a very short period of time. Please.
Can I ask you also about the African-American disparities?
Yes,
I have
sure.
a question for you and a question for the Surgeon General.
Sure.
For you, Mr. President, we know that these health disparities have existed for a long time among African-Americans, Latinos, and other people of color. Why did the administration possibly have a plan directed at those communities to prevent high death rates, knowing that the health disparities were there?
Well, we do have a plan, and one of the things I'm most proud about is what I've been able to do for the African American community. The lowest job numbers in the history of our country. This was
for the virus, of
yeah,
course.
just before the virus came. Well, I'm just saying, because, you know, this has been here for 3 weeks, right? So just before, African American community had the lowest unemployment, the best employment numbers. More African American people and communities have been thriving. If you look at our opportunity zones and what we did, Tim Scott, who's fantastic, a fantastic senator, came to me, opportunity zones, more jobs for African Americans than ever before, better health care than they've ever had before. All of these things. The Surgeon General spoke to it, and he spoke to it, I thought, really brilliantly. I found it very interesting what he said, and I'd love you to come up and answer the second part of a question, because I think you would do it a much better job than I would. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Surgeon General.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a quick question for you. You said that African Americans and Latinos should avoid alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. You also said do it for your abuela, do it for Big Mama, and Pop Pop. There are some people already on.
Too.
There are some people online are already offended by that language and the idea that you're saying behaviors might be leading to these high death rates. Could you talk about whether or not could you, I guess, have a response for people who might be offended by the language that you used?
Well, I use that language because that's the language. I've been meeting with the NAACP, with the National Medical Association, with others. I actually talked with Derek Johnson multiple times this week, the head of the NAACP, and we need targeted outreach to the African American community, and I use the language that is used in my family. I have a Puerto Rican brother-in-law. I call my granddaddy granddaddy. I have relatives who call their grandparents Big Mama. So that was not meant to be offensive. That's the language that we use and that I use, and we need to continue to target our outreach to those communities. It is critically important that they understand it's not just about them. And I was very clear about that. It's not just about what you do, but you also are not helpless. We need to do our part at the federal level. We need people to do their parts at the state level, and we need everyone, black, brown, white, whatever color you are, to follow the president's guidelines, the coronavirus guidelines, and do their part. Because when I talked to the NAACP 3 weeks ago, it's important to note that one of the things they asked me was, can you help dispel the myths in this community that people actually can't get coronavirus if they're black? That was a myth that was out there that's actually very important for us to squash here.
So do you recommend that all Americans avoid tobacco, alcohol, and drug use at this time?
Absolutely. It's especially important for people who are at risk and with comorbidities, but yes, all Americans. So thank you, and I will clarify that. All Americans need to avoid these substances at all times. I put out a smoking cessation report in January. I put out an advisory against youth and pregnant women using marijuana last year, and that was not directed towards any one race. That's everybody needs to do everything they can to be as healthy as possible at this critical time. Dr. Fauci, would you add anything?
Yeah.
I think you said it perfectly, Jerome. Thank you.
Would you like to add anything to it? Because you are really, you expressed it very beautifully before.
No, I mean, Jerome, you did it beautifully. I can't do it any better than that. And I know Jerome personally, and I can just testify that he made not even a hint of being offensive at all with that comment. I thought that was appropriate. Thanks.
And I can tell you, Jerome has done a fantastic job, our Surgeon General. I just hope nobody steals him and he goes to one of these big companies for a fortune. Don't leave us, right? Don't leave us, Jerome, please. He's doing a great, you are happy and you're doing a great job. And everybody tells me that too, so we appreciate it. Please.
Thank you. So Google and Apple have announced that they are jointly enabling contact tracing on their mobile phone operating systems. And I was wondering if this is something that you would consider, or maybe the doctors
Well, that's
would consider.
individual freedoms, problems, and a lot of other things. Is it something we're going to look at it, certainly, and we know they've done that, and it's it's very new technology. It's very interesting, but a lot of people worry about it in terms of a person's freedom. We're going to take a look at that, a very strong look at it. We'll let you know pretty soon.
And I have another
Brand
question.
new, yes, please.
So can you explain why it is appropriate in the middle of a pandemic to be talking about cutting or eliminating funding for the World Health Organization?
Well, we're going to talk about the WHO next week in great detail. I didn't want to do it today, Good Friday. I didn't want to do it before Easter. I also didn't want to do it before we have all the facts. But over the years, many years, we've been paying them from 300 to 500 and even more $1 million a year. China's been paying them less than 40 over the years. So we're paying them more than 10 times more than China. And they are very, very China-centric, as I said during the week, China-centric. China always seems to get the better of the argument. And I don't like that. I really don't like that. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think it's fair to the American people. And, you know, I tell that to President Xi. I tell that to Dr. Tedros. I spoke to him one time. I think he's a very nice man. I liked him. But we're going to be talking about that next week in great detail. We're looking at it very, very closely. We want to make sure money is properly spent. But again, why is the United States paying $500 million a year? It's a lot. And why is, okay, that's a lot. And why is China paying this year, $42 million, but generally under 40, so it's in the 30s. So we're at 500, 452, 400, 401, different amounts, different years. and they're at 40, 38, 36, 35, 32, 31. No, but you have to ask yourself that question. And then the answer always turns out to be in China's favor. Well, I have the same thing with the world trade. Isn't it interesting? World trade. So we have World Health and we have World Trade. So we have the World Trade Organization. And until I came along, we were losing cases, so many cases, it was ridiculous. We were always losing these cases, I mean, almost every case. And now we're winning cases. We just won $7 billion because they know I'm not going to put up with it. China has been unbelievably taken advantage of us and other countries. You know, for instance, they're considered a developing nation. I said, well, then make us a developing nation too. They get big advantages because they're a developing nation. India, a developing nation. The United States is the big developed nation. Well, we have plenty of development to do, okay? And now we're winning cases because they know that if we're not treated fairly, I'm going to pull out. Now, you never heard this before because nobody ever talked about the World Trade Organization, but the World Trade Organization has treated us very unfairly. But they know I'm not going to put up with it because all of these countries are taking advantage of the United States. Now, in the courts and the court system, we're not approving new judges over the last year and a half. We're not going to approve them. And Bob Lighthizer is working very hard on that. But we had always a minority position, meaning numbers of judges. So we'd have a minority number of judges. I said, how do you win with a minority number of judges? But all of a sudden we're winning. And the reason we're winning is they know if they don't treat us properly, and we won $7 billion just this very recently, and the money is pouring in. And we've won other cases too. We've won a lot of cases. But you know from covering it, I know you know, that the United States was taken advantage of by the World Trade Organization. And by the way, speaking of China, if you look at the history of China, it was only since they went into the World Trade Organization that they became a rocket ship with their economy. They were flatlined for years and years, frankly, for many, many decades. It was only when they came into the World Trade Organization that they became a rocket ship because they took advantage of all the rules. I'm not even blaming them. I'm saying how stupid were the people that stood here and allowed it to happen. But we don't allow that to happen. And if they don't treat us fairly, we'll leave. But now we're starting to win cases. How about somebody new for a change? Come on, go ahead.
President, as many schools and school districts are closing across the country, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has not ruled out closing or opening out schools in May, saying that many kids are not vulnerable to this disease. Do you agree with that assessment? And do you believe that schools, would you recommend that schools open up and to those states that have?
Well, I have a lot of confidence in Ron DeSantis, a lot of faith in Ron DeSantis to make the right decision. He's doing a great job as governor. Ron DeSantis, I had read where he's thinking about opening up the schools earlier than the date, the end of the month. I'd have to look at the numbers. But again, you know, I like to allow governors to make decisions without overruling them. Because from a constitutional standpoint, that's the way it should be done. If I disagreed, I would overrule a governor, and I have that right to do it. But I'd rather have them, you can call it federalist, you can call it the Constitution, but I call it the Constitution. I would rather have them make their decisions. But he's made a lot of good decisions. And he hasn't said he's going to, but he's thinking about it. So I'll take a look at it.
If I can ask a follow-up to one of the doctors, if you allow children back in the schools, you know, wouldn't that pose a threat to spreading the virus even further to some of those vulnerable?
Well, I think the answer is obvious, but if you want either, would you want to just talk about that, maybe? Tony?
Kicks me up here, right?
I know. I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, from pure public health issues is that if you have a situation in which you don't have a real good control over an outbreak and you allow children to gather together, they likely will get infected. And if they get infected, the likelihood that they will bring the infection home. So that really is a risk. I don't know the situation at all in any detail, and I'm not specifically speaking about Florida. I'm just speaking generically about what happens when you have infections in the community and you have congregation of people, such as in classrooms, that's a risk.
Has anyone under 25 died, Dr. Fauci, in the country?
Yes.
The governor
Yes.
said that no one under 25 has died. I guess you could clarify that people under 25 can die as a result of this
Maybe in Florida they have.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Again,
in the country.
okay, let's do that because I don't want to have to be answering for a particular state. Yes, people under 25 have died of coronavirus disease in the United States of America.
If you reopen the country in May and there's a new outbreak or a spike in infections, are you open to the idea of shutting the country down again?
Depending on the outbreak, yeah.
You would be open.
Depending, I mean, and that's happened, as you know, in a couple of countries. You know what I'm doing? I'm watching other countries. In many cases, they're ahead of us from the standpoint that it attacked them before us. It hit them first. And I'm watching what's happening with respect to certain other countries, some of them obvious, some of them less obvious, and what they're doing and the success that they're having. And that's going to play a large part of the role. We're also setting up a council of very, very great doctors and business people. We're going to be announcing it on Tuesday. Of some great people.
Economic task force.
There's a second task force?
This is beyond economic. This is really, I call it the Opening Our Country Task Force, or Opening Our Country Council, so we don't get it confused with Mike's task force, which has done so great. And we're going to have the great business leaders, great doctors. We're going to have a great group of people. We'll probably do it by teleconference because we don't really want them traveling in for their own purposes. I don't think it would look good also, but we don't want them traveling in. So we'll do teleconference. We did one the other day with the banks, and it was very successful, the teleconference itself. And we'll be announcing names on Tuesday, who's on that. And that'll play a role, but ultimately I have to make that decision. And then I'll have to make a decision. Do we close a little area that's a hot spot? I do say this, Jim, I want to get it open as soon as possible. This country was meant to be open and vibrant and great, not where people are, staying and.
Are you determined to do
I'm
that
not.
first?
I would love to open it. I'm not determined anything. The facts are going to determine what I do, but we do want to get the country open. So important. So I'll have a task force. I'll have a council. It's going to be announced on Tuesday, with names that you have a lot of respect for. A lot of great names, different businesses, different people. Bipartisan. I didn't even ask. I mean. Honestly, I think it's bipartisan. The one thing I didn't ask, are you Republican or a Democrat? Hard to believe, but I didn't ask. So it would be. And I want their views on what they think. Also, very important, different parts of the country. Because you go to the Midwest, it's different than perhaps the East Coast or the West Coast. Now, the West Coast, those numbers are really pretty amazing on the West Coast. Very interesting. So we're going to be announcing that in a very short while, probably Tuesday. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Government officials in Latin American and Caribbean nations, Bahamas, Cayman Islands, have been saying that U.S. authorities are blocking the shipment of PPE in certain cases, and I'm wondering if you could speak to that as
well. What
is
they're
the
doing,
process?
we have a tremendous force out there, naval force, and we're blocking the shipment of drugs. So maybe what they're doing is stopping ships that they want to look. We're not blocking. What we're doing is we're making sure we don't want drugs in our country. And especially with the over 160 miles of wall, it's getting very hard to get through the border. They used to drive right through the border like they owned it. And in a certain way, they did. They could drive right. They had human trafficking. All of a sudden, they have a powerful wall up. And they're not driving through that wall. That wall is tough. And it's also loaded up with equipment, cameras and sensors and everything you can think of. On top of that, we have drones flying back and forth over it. So it's a very powerful barrier between Mexico and the United States. A lot of people, though, what they're doing now is they're trying to come in through the waterways, whether it's the Gulf or the ocean itself. And what we're doing is we're being very tough. And we're being tough because of drugs and also human trafficking. And remember, the human trafficking is mostly females. It's mostly females. It's horrible, and what we're seeing is horrible. But you have we have a human trafficking problem worldwide, the likes of which, you think of it as an ancient thing. It's not ancient. It's bigger now than it's ever been before over the last 10 years because of the Internet. The Internet made human trafficking to the extent that it is now, which is massive. The internet made it so big. So we have a big naval force that's stopping. So maybe when you mention that, maybe their ships are getting caught. But we are stopping a lot of ships, and we're finding a lot of drugs. Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir. On the additional money for small
I meant you, but that's okay. Go ahead. We'll do this.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
On the additional money for small business, apparently Treasury Secretary Mnuchin speaking with the Democrats in Congress.
Yeah.
Are you allowing?
Are you talking about the new?
Yeah, the new $250 billion.
Yeah, $250.
Are you willing to give into the Democratic demands for additional money for hospitals, states, and cities in that interim round?
I'd rather have that be in phase 4. I don't deny it. I think it's fun, but I think it should be in phase 4, and I think we should have infrastructure, and I think we should have a payroll tax moratorium, because that's something that over a period of time the workers get, sort of semi-immediately. It's over that period of time. It starts immediately, but it's over a period of time. I mean, there are a lot of people, I'm one of them, that would have liked to have seen the payroll tax cut as a permanent cut. But we should do the double-edged, meaning business, employee, payroll tax cut. So we're talking about that. And I'm certainly okay with helping the states and helping the hospitals. I just think, because, look, the hospitals need help. You see what they've gone through. And the states need help. Some states in particular need help. They need big help. I'm willing to look at that very strongly, but I like looking at it in phase 4. The 251 is actually, the plan is working out well. The banks are getting started with the distribution. They've taken thousands and thousands of applications. The numbers aren't even believable, the number of applications. They're swamped, but Bank of America and Wells Fargo, and I guess Citibank is just now kicking in. And also, what nobody's talking about, the commercial banks, the community banks. Everyone's talking commercial banks. The community banks are doing tremendous volumes, and they're probably doing them faster from what I understand. I hear the community banks, frankly, are the easiest ones in terms of getting the money out. So the money is getting out. The applications are far beyond what we ever anticipated, and that's why we're going, because this is money that goes essentially to the workers. We want the businesses to hold on to their workers, because once they lose the workers, they're never opening again. It's not going to happen. Okay, in the back.
Sir, Gordon Lewald from Wall Street Journal. I wondered if you could expand a little bit on your, like the form that Mexico would take, the reimbursements, like what form would that take? You essentially add it to the tab for the wall that you mentioned. And I have a second question by that.
Well, there's no real cost, because we're agreeing to produce a little bit less. So number one, it's staying in the ground. You have it for another day. It's actually cheaper than storing it, where you take it out and you deliver it to a massive well, like the strategic reserves, our national strategic reserves, where it has to be brought there. And that's, an expensive process in itself. But oil is getting to a point where, there are some areas, some people would say the water is more valuable than the oil. You never thought you were going to see that. You never thought, having covered, I know you cover it, you never thought you'd be seeing oil at $20 a barrel, but how about $10 a barrel? That you never thought you'd see. So we are looking at it very strongly. There is no real cost. I was helping I want to help Mexico out. We have a great relationship with Mexico, great relationship with the president. I really like him a lot. He's been terrific to us on the border, because he stopped. You don't see the caravans coming up anymore. You don't see all the problems. When I took office, it was unbelievable what was going on. And they have been helping us a lot, and we've been helping them a lot. They make product for us, they sell it to us, and it's fine. It's a good relationship. Sometimes it's a great relationship. So he could not have done any more than that. And I think there was political reasons for that for him, that other nations don't have. They don't have that. The nations that we're talking about, the 22 other nations that we're talking about, they just don't have that problem. So it doesn't cost us anything, and yet it's very valuable. We will be reimbursed in the future, maybe in the near future, maybe in the more distant future, but we'll be reimbursed by Mexico in a certain way, and it'll be fine. But we get Mexico over the hump. Now, with all of that being said, that doesn't mean the deal's going to happen anyway, because they still have a lot of different states. But this was one of the stumbling blocks. Okay, go ahead.
If I may, China and some other countries have been particularly active, seen as maybe taking advantage of the U.S. during this process. During this period. China particularly active in the South China Sea. You've got a carrier down, obviously. What's your message to some of these adversaries and competitors?
Well, look, the way I view it is this. China has taken advantage of the United States for 30 years, okay? I mentioned the World Trade Organization. China has taken advantage of us through that and using rules that are unfair to the United States, and they should have never been allowed, this should have never been allowed to happen. When China joined and was allowed to join under those circumstances, the World Trade Organization, that was a very bad day for the United States because they had rules and regulations that were far different and far easier than our rules and regulations. Plus, they took advantage of them down to the last, and you know China and you study China, and you know what I mean. They took advantage of them like very few people would even think to take advantage of them. And again, they are considered, right, a developing nation. We are not considered a developing nation. They're given advantages. Okay. For many years, China has ripped off the United States. And then I came along. And right now, as you know, China's paying 25%, and we've taken in billions and billions and billions of dollars in tariffs from China. And I know a lot of the people kept saying, oh, no, we're paying. Well, we're not paying. You know, countries are different. Not every country is China. But China would devalue their currency, and they'd also pour out money. And they essentially were paying most of those tariffs, not us. And as you know, we've taken in tens of billions of dollars. They targeted our farmers. But we took in so much money that I was able to give back. One year it was 12 billion, one year it was 16 billion. I was able to give back our farmers the money that they were targeted, hurt. China bought 12 billion and bought 16 billion. 1 year 12, 1 year 16. I was able to give them back the 12 and then give them back to 16, the farmers. And they weren't targeted, and they're all in business. Now we're doing it because they got targeted in a different way. Now I'm going to be very interested to see. So we signed a deal with China, and under that deal, they're supposed to buy substantially in excess of $200 billion from us. That's not only farm product, it's manufacturing product, it's lots of different things. They're going to buy a lot. I just want to see if they live up to that deal. I know President Xi, I would say he would live up to the deal. But remember this. I never took off the tariff. It's still 25%. That's how big. 25% of $250 billion. So for the first time, and you saw also, now again, I'm going before the virus hit, because that's sort of like, that's like, let's start all over again. Okay? I can't tell you that yet, because that chapter hasn't been written yet. But go up a few weeks ago, the deficit with the United States and China was coming way down. Nobody's seen that. Nobody's ever seen that before. But the deficit has come way down. So now we start a new chapter. And I can only tell you, if a smart person is standing where I'm standing, we're going to do very well with China. Okay? And I think it's, I have to also say this, I think our relationship and having the relationship I have with China is a good thing. But for the first time, we're benefiting instead of being the sucker that could, you know, that got taken advantage for years. Nobody. You know, I said to China, how did this ever happen? I got to know him very well. I said to him, representatives of China at the top level, you know who I'm talking about. I say, how did this ever happen? They looked at me and they said, but nobody ever called us. We didn't have a deal. It's not like we had a bad deal. We had worse. We didn't have any deal at all. So they just took advantage. Think of it, $500 billion a year deficit. Not 500 million's a lot of money, right? It's not, everyone thinks I made a mistake when I say 500 trillion. No, you mean 500 million. No, I said $500 billion a year deficit with China for a long time. But it was 200, it was 300, it was 400, it was 500, 556 billion, 507 $500 billion plus a year deficit with China. Now I'm charging them tariffs. And you know, it's very interesting. A lot of people that don't want to do that, they all agreed because China has taken advantage of this country like nobody has ever taken. We have built China with the money we gave them. Now, I give them a lot of credit, okay? I give them a lot of credit. They did it. But you know what? We made it a hell of a lot easier. We gave them a fortune. Go ahead. How about you in the back? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Deborah Saunders with the Las Vegas Review Journal, and I'm here today as a print reporter, print puller. So
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a question and then ask a question from one of the reporters who couldn't be here because of social
Sure, go
distancing.
ahead.
Thank you.
A little louder, please.
Thank you. I was wondering if you have been tested for antibodies, if you've taken the antibody
Have
test.
I been tested for?
Yes.
Not that I know of. I've had some tests.
Has
No?
anybody else here
They
been
tell me
tested?
no. I'll
Has
accept
anybody
it.
else in the task force been tested for antibodies?
We don't have a testing.
You don't have the test?
That'll come out. They've just developed those tests, sort of new.
Okay, good to know. So this question is from Andrew Feinberg with Newsweek. A significant amount of federal aid was made available to Boeing in the recently signed CARES Act relief package. But according to sources, Boeing executives are still planning a round of layoffs. So should Boeing or any company that accepts federal aid to stay in business during this pandemic be penalized for laying off workers after doing so?
Yeah. Well, the aid hasn't been given yet, but they will be asking, in my opinion. They haven't even asked yet. Boeing has not asked for aid yet, but I think they probably will. Now, at the same time, they do have to run a company. You know, this isn't a great time to sell airplanes. Let's not kid ourselves, okay? If you're a business person, Boeing makes airplanes. They had a big problem with one, but they make the greatest airplanes. They make the best airplanes in the world. They had the problem with one. They got it too complex. It becomes so complex. You have to be number one in your class at MIT to be able to fly it. It's a mistake. Every 2 years, they want to make it more and more. I mean, they had great success with the 737, the Boeing 737. Then all of a sudden, they do the MAX, and they say, let's make it more complicated. Let's put on different engines. Let's do this. Let's do that. It was not exactly a good decision. Bad decision. Very bad, horrible decision. Number one, human lives, and number two, horrible what's happened to the company. Here's a company, from a business standpoint, was like probably the greatest company in the world, in my opinion. I think it amounts to 1% of GDP. Some people say it's a half. I think it's 1. But here's one of the greatest companies anywhere in the world, maybe the greatest. And boom. Now, on top of what happened there with the 2 planes, and they say they have that fixed. That's good. They say they have it fixed undisputably. In fact, somebody said, they gave me something. I said, you should say it that way. They said, sir, this is now the safest airplane in the air. I said, that's what you should say. That's a very good statement. It's the safest airplane in the air. That's a very good statement. You should use it. I said, by the way, you're changing the name? But whether you do or not, you should use that. But he said that. A Boeing person said to me, it's the safest airplane in the air. That's a great thing. But we know they're going to need help. Now, does that mean they're going to need help and they should keep people that they absolutely don't need? That business is a very cyclical business, like many businesses, frankly. So that determination hasn't made. They have not spoken to us yet. I think they will be. Maybe they won't need help. That'll be great. Look, Boeing made so much money. Who would have thought they could have made all of those planes that are parked all over the place? In many cases, I guess payments not made. But who would have thought they could do that and they're still a solvent company? Okay? I mean, what a tragic thing happened in numerous ways, but also economically. So when they see us, making sure that Boeing is strong again is very, very powerful and very important, and we'll do whatever is necessary to do. Please.
Yeah, thank you. I have a quick one and then a longer one. First of all, have you had a chance...
Should we keep this going, everybody? Huh?
You're the president.
Jim wants to leave. No. Keep it going for a while, yes? I mean, we have time if you want. You're not going to criticize me that the conference was too long? You know, if I leave short, yesterday I left short. It was too short. If I stay too long, they say it was too long. Someday we're going to get it just right. Okay. Should we continue? Should we continue? Yes?
Well, at least answer my questions. Yeah.
Okay, let's, at least for your question.
Have you had a chance to speak to...
Not a bad boy.
Have you had a chance yet to speak to Boris Johnson since he came
I
out?
have not. No, I have a call just to wish him well to his group. No, I don't want to be calling him now. I want him to get better. He's a great guy. He's become a friend of mine, a real friend of mine. You know, he has a great feeling for our country. Obviously, for his country, he loves it. He's a tremendous guy.
And slightly more complicated.
He's become. I think he's probably right now. He was very high to start. I think he might be 100% popularity right now. I think he's. You know, where they talk about approval polls, right? You ever hear that term? I'm sure you never heard that. I hear it all the time. His approval rating must be about 300%. But he's a great guy. He was a great guy before, and I think people see what he's been through. What he's been through is incredible. And they say a big turn. So let's see what happens. Let's hope.
And if I may, where do you see the use of something like immunity certificates or documents or passports when we get to
Something like, excuse me?
immunity certificates? Once we get to antibody testing, whether this will be a useful way.
Well, I
of
see a
getting people
lot
back
of,
to work.
I see a lot of different things. We're going to be very careful for who comes into the country. Look, my opposition party wants to have open borders. This is a case where I'm very glad that my position is I don't want open borders. I want very strong borders. That includes not only on the southern border, our southern border with Mexico, and you could also say our northern border with Canada. But we want to have strong borders. And I think this is maybe one of the learning points. We learned something about borders. We need borders. The country needs borders to be a great country. And I think this is a great point. Go ahead. Do you have something else?
Yeah, I wasn't just thinking about for borders. I just thought for ordinary Americans who are currently stuck at home, if they're tested for antibodies, it turns out they've had the disease and therefore shouldn't be infected again. Some sort of documentation that would allow them to go back to work safely.
You mean once they get better?
Yeah, or people who might not.
Okay, so they have the disease, and they're better, and they have the immunity now. They have, supposedly, according to what I'm hearing, it could be for a long period, could be for a lifetime, it could also be for a year or two, I'm hearing, Tony. So, nobody's told me yet if it's for a year, if it's for 2 years, or if it's for a lifetime. Like chicken pox. They say if you have chicken pox, you have immunity. They say for a lifetime. I hope that's true. But nobody's actually told me with certainty, maybe because they don't know yet. You don't know yet. Because it's new. You know, this came upon us. Nobody knew. They do know you have it for a period of time. And it's strong for a period of time. They don't know, and that's hence the antibodies that we're making. I saw somebody who was really sick, and he got better, a young person, relatively young person, 35, and physically fit, you know, and he got better. He made it, barely, but he made it. His first thing that he did when he was better is, I want to give whatever I can give to help other people, because nobody should go through it. It's a tough thing. So we don't know yet how long, if you'd like to add anything to that, but we don't know yet, is it a year? It will be a year, but is it more than a year? And only time is going to tell, okay? Thank you.
Just one more question.
Go ahead, try one more.
Will you have governors, mayors, members of Congress on the Open the Country Council that you talked about?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to put some governors. I've gained great respect for governors, both Republican and Democrat. I've actually become friends with some of the Democrat governors that I wouldn't have really had the privilege of getting to know. And Governor Murphy of New Jersey is a very liberal guy. I'm not, but we've had a great relationship. John Bell, as you know, I call him John Bell, but John Bell Edwards, people call him John Bell, sort of a cool name, from Louisiana. I have a very good relationship with him. Gavin Newsom, honestly, I think we've fight on every. Hey, we're fighting right now. I want automobiles to be made cheaper and safer, stronger, but you save $3,000-4,000 per auto, and environmentally equal, or better maybe. And we're fighting on that. We're fighting a lot of different things. We fight on the border. He wants open borders. I want people to come into our country illegally. But I've gotten very friendly with Gavin Newsom. He's done a very good job here. I think I've gotten very friendly. I mean, he's been, I think, sort of a friend of mine for a long time. Don't get to see him much, but Governor Cuomo of New York, we talk all the time. I told you, I spoke to him literally the last call just before walking in here. I've really developed a lot of good friendships with the governors, and including the governors. I think Mike DeWine, Republican, but I think he's done a great job in Ohio. So yeah, I want to put on both parties. I want to have some governors. I'm not going to have all of the governors, but I'd like to put some representative governors on the council. Yes, I would like to do that.
Any to serve? Yes.
I have. I've asked a couple of them. They've all said yes. So far, everyone said yes. I think everybody would like to be on that council. That's a very important council. Go ahead in the back. You haven't gone yet.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions, if I may. Do you have a message to those pastors who are still planning to have Easter services, defying the public health guidelines?
Well, so you're going to have to say it louder. To those what?
To those pastors who are still planning to have Easter services in person.
Pastors who
Oh,
are
the pastors. I
defying
didn't
the-
understand your word. Okay. You have a very nice voice, but it's a little bit low, and you're far back. I've had talks with the pastors, and most of the pastors agree. And it's a very complex subject, let's face it, for the obvious reasons. I don't have to go into it. Most of the pastors agree that they are better off doing what they're doing, which is distancing. They feel that let's get this over with, and they want to get back to church so badly. I mean, can you imagine we have Easter Sunday, and I'm going to be watching Pastor Robert Jeffress, who's been a great guy. Did I tell you? He's been a great guy, and I'm going to be watching on a laptop. Now, a laptop is not the same as being in his church or being in another church. It's not. No matter what you say, we can say, oh, isn't it wonderful? But I've done this for 3 weeks, and they've had tremendous, I let people know who it is. They've had the biggest audiences they've ever had. They have millions of people now watching, and people are really liking what they're hearing. So I'm going to be with, on Easter, Pastor, I don't even know if he knows it yet, but he will soon. I think he will in about 2 minutes. Pastor Robert Jeffress. And he's a terrific guy, a terrific man. I've gotten to know him very well. He's a man of great compassion. He loves our country. And I'm going to be with him on Easter, meaning I'm going to be with him watching on a laptop. Doesn't sound good, but it's, it's one of those things. It cannot be church. I'm not going to get into it. It cannot be church. Most pastors and most people, of faith, people that we listen to and respect and admire. Franklin Graham is a person I have great respect for. Most people will, and who's done an incredible job in New York on Central Park, where they put up Samaritan's Purse. He's done an incredible job. The son of the late, great Billy Graham. His family is incredible. He's incredible. Franklin Graham, the job he's doing he loves to do it. He has such a passion, and that's why he's so good at it. He does it with incredible love. And he will tell you, we're all saying we've got to get our country cured. I know there are some pastors and ministers and others that want to get together. And I have great respect for them. 2 of them I know. But I would say first, I'm a Christian, heal our country. Let's get healed before we do this. And if there's time to do that, we'll do it for hopefully the rest of our lives. Please.
Thank you. The Mercy and the Comfort seem to be underutilized at the moment in Los Angeles and New York. Is there any consideration either to sending the medical units into the cities to help the hospitals there, or to moving the hospital ships?
So the Mercy and the Comfort were sent when projections were much higher. And I say, Tony backed it up. Deborah made the statement. They said, you're not going to need these many rooms. But we wanted to be prepared. I mean, we had the ship. They did an incredible job. With the Comfort was supposed to be in maintenance for a period of 4 weeks, and they had it done in 3.5, 4 days. And it came up. And so we had it there. If there was a disaster from the standpoint of you needed all of the... Now, I tell you, the Javits Center... Andrew will tell you, we were ready to go. It's incredible the job they did. But they're using less beds. This is a good thing, not a bad thing. They're using less beds. Now, Javits has been pretty busy over the last couple of days, and the death numbers are horrific. But you go back now, and you're finding they're going to start to come down very substantially, just based on the fact that the bed usage, the number of beds are much, much less. Much, much less. So the Mercy and the Comfort were there in case they needed them. Los Angeles, where you have the one, and New York, where you have the other. They just don't. Fortunately, we haven't hit numbers where they would have been used. They're always going to be sort of overflow because they're on the edges. They're not as convenient as certain places. But the people were ready, willing, and able. They were ready to go. They were going to do a great job. But fortunately, we don't need, just like we didn't need as many ventilators. When they were asking in New York for 40,000 ventilators, I had experts, these people, I listened to them. They said, you'll never need that many. And they were right. And New York now has its, and I dealt really well with Mayor de Blasio. We got him a lot of ventilators. We got Andrew a lot of ventilators. But we never felt you needed the numbers that you were talking about, and we were right on that. Now, with all of that being said, we have a lot of ventilators ready to go. We have almost 10,000 in the stockpile. That 10,000 can move rapidly. We can be within 24 hours almost anywhere. And hopefully we're not going to have to be, but it's really, this has been a great military operation. It hasn't all been military because we're dealing with great companies. We have companies that are making masks, and we're all set up on the mask tool. I just told you we have an order coming in soon, 500 million masks, 500 million. We have companies, you know the story with GM or 3M, also GM, but 3M is doing a great job. I spoke to the CEO the other day. We settled it out. We had a dispute with them, and it's now all settled. And I think they're trying to show the country something, maybe me, but the country something. So we've done, you know, I think, and not me, I'm not talking about this country, our country, the people that are doing it, Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, these people sitting right here, people that we have in the back that are watching every word that we're saying, they've done a fantastic job. They really have done a fantastic job. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to ask you a question about testing. You've mentioned the impossibility of testing the entire American public. So has
what do we have?
The Surgeon General. Hold on.
What do we have? 350 million people? You're going to do 300?
That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is priorities. And Dr. Birx has mentioned how there have been priorities in certain regional parts of the country. And I wanted to ask you specifically about one industry in particular, and that's food processing plants. Is there a priority to get testing at food processing plants all across the country?
Well, you're asking that because of what happened. It's a fair question, too. What happened in Denver? Because in Denver, I've never seen, I said, what's going on? We're looking at this graph where everything's looking beautiful and it's coming down, and then you got this one spike. I said, what happened in Denver? And many people, very quickly. And by the way, they were on it like so fast you wouldn't believe it. They knew every aspect. They had people going, not only testing, who did you see, where were you, how many people did you meet, were you out to dinner in somebody else's home, where were you, where did this number of people come from, they are totally on it. Now this just happened. I just saw it this morning. I'm looking at everything smooth, going down, topping out. Then you have this one spike in Denver. It's like, where did this come from? So we'll be looking at that, and we don't want cases like that happening. This is the kind of thing can happen. This is very complex. This is a very brilliant enemy. You know, it's a brilliant enemy. They develop drugs like the antibiotics. You see it. Antibiotics used to solve every problem. Now one of the biggest problems the world has is the germ has gotten so brilliant that the antibiotic can't keep up with it. And they're constantly trying to come up with a new. People go to a hospital and they go for a heart operation. That's no problem, but they end up dying from problems. You know the problems I'm talking about. There's a whole genius to it. We're fighting, not only is it hidden, but it's very smart, okay? It's invisible, and it's hidden, but it's very smart. And you see that in a case like Denver. But I think we're doing well, and they're on Denver like you wouldn't believe. I came in this morning, it was a flurry. I said, what's going on? They said, Denver. I said, what happened at Denver? Because Denver was doing pretty well. And they've got that under control. But yeah, that would be a case where you do some very big testing. Peter?
Mr. President, we learned that more than 16 million Americans filed for unemployment over the past 3 weeks. It's Good Friday. It's payday. We are seeing troubling, paralyzing lines at food banks around the country. What do you say to those Americans in need right this moment?
Number one, I love them. Number two, we're working really hard. It wasn't their fault what happened. Sometimes they don't do a good job and they lose their job. That's one thing. This is a case where we take the strongest economy in the history of the world, which is what we had. More people working in the United States, Peter, than ever before. Almost, look at the numbers. 160 million people, almost, just short of 160. Excuse me. So we have the greatest economy we've ever had. And by the way, black unemployment, Hispanic unemployment, Asian unemployment, the best numbers we've ever had in virtually every way. And then you get hit like this, and it's traumatic. People that had great jobs, that went out to dinner and they didn't have any problems, they take their family, they were making good salaries, all of a sudden, you know, you use the term cold turkey. It's cold turkey. They go from that to having no money and waiting for their checks, which are being processed very rapidly, but they have to go out and look for money. It's a terrible thing. All I say is we love them. We're working so hard, and they're going to be back. And I hope they're going to be back even stronger than before.
Let me ask you about that if I can, just to follow up then. You chose not to do a national stay-at-home order. Now that you say you want to reopen parts of the economy, what authority do you have to do that? Isn't it ultimately up to the states to do that?
Yeah, no, it's really, the states can do things if they want. I can override it if I want. But the national stay-at-home, just so you understand, 95% of the country is stay-at-home. Like as an example, I was speaking with the great governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, the other day. He has a stay-at-home. A lot of people didn't even know it, but he had a stay-at-home. Some people reported Texas wasn't. He had a very strong stay-at-home. 95 to 96%. South Carolina, as you know, has it, which at one point a week ago they didn't have. South Carolina, another great governor, McMaster. 95% of the country is covered. Now, the states that aren't, and again, constitutionally, from a federalist standpoint, if I thought there was a problem, if I saw a state with a problem, I would absolutely demand it. But they're doing great. And the states that aren't are states that have not had a big problem.
What authority do you have to reopen right now? The same way that it's up to the states to shut it down, it's up to them to reopen. What authority
I
do you
have great authority if I want to use it. I would rather have the states use it. I would rather, and this is so shocking for me. A lot of people are saying, wow, he's really very reasoned, isn't he? A lot of people are shocked. They think I'd do it. I have absolute authority to use it. But so far, our relationship with governors and the job they're doing, I haven't had to do it. Would I do it if I saw a state that was out of control and they didn't have the stay-at-home policy? I would do it in a heartbeat. Jeff?
Mr. President, there's obviously a lot of interest in how you're going to make that decision.
It's a very big decision. I don't know that I've had a bigger decision than that when you think, right?
I would think.
I mean, think of that decision. Somebody said it's totally up to the president. I saw this morning. It's totally up, and it is. I don't know that I've had a bigger decision, but I'm going to surround myself with the greatest minds, not only the greatest minds, but the greatest minds in numerous different businesses, including the business of politics and reason. And we're going to make a decision, and hopefully it's going to be the right decision. I will say this. I want to get it open as soon as we can. We have to get our country open, Jeff.
Can you say, sir, what metrics you will use to make that decision?
The metrics right here. That's my metrics. That's all I can do. I can listen to 35 people. At the end, I've got to make a decision. And I didn't think of it until yesterday. I said, you know, this is a big decision. But I want to be guided. I'm going to be guided by them. I'm going to be guided by our vice president. I'm going to make a decision based on a lot of different opinions. Some will maybe disagree, and some I'd love to see it where they don't disagree. Will there be risks? There's always going to be a risk that something can flare up. There's always going to, look at what's happening where countries are trying to get open and there's a flare up and they'll go. But I'd like the flare up to be very localized so that we can control it from a local standpoint without having to close. There's always a risk. This is genius that we're fighting. You know, we're fighting this hidden enemy, which is genius, okay? It's genius. The way it's attacked so many countries at so many different angles. And I mean, you take a look at what's going on. And the greatest doctors in the world, I think they're close, by the way, but they haven't figured it out yet. Look what it's done to some people. I mean, some people it's grabbed, and it's a horrible way to go. You want to know the truth? It's a horrible, and then other people it hardly has an impact on. We talked about it. It's sniffles. It's less. They don't even know they had anything. And some people, I looked at New York this morning, and I look at what's happening and the amount of people that are dying, and dying, violently dying. It's a very tough adversary. But we're going to win, and we're going to win it. We're going to win it very decisively. I'm going to have to make a decision And I only hope to God that it's the right decision. But I would say without question, it's the biggest decision I've ever had to make.
Quick follow-up for the doctors, if I may, for Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx. The models, as I understand them, are based on social distancing continuing through May. Is that correct? And if you were to open the economy on May 1st or sometime during that month, would that impact the models in terms of the deaths that you expect?
Want to answer that?
We're taking turns today. Good. It's good. So the model, the IHME model, does state that it's through May. We've had these model discussions, haven't we, for weeks now. So the models are informed by the data, and you can see how much that model has shifted on the amazing work of the American people. So I think that's what we're evaluating right now. Remember when I talked yesterday, I've been in public health a long time. I have never, except for Ebola, where we worked very closely with the communities about specific issues, we've never taken a countrywide or a global-wide approach to mitigation. This is unprecedented. I will tell you there is nothing in the literature about specifically what to expect, and I think that's why the models continue to modify themselves based on what actually has happened with social distancing and hand washing and all of the pieces that the American people are doing, the decreasing, the closing of the bars, the closing of the restaurants, no communal eating. That was thought to be a very big issue in many of the other cultures that went through this virus. So the models continue to evolve based on the impact. And so therefore it makes it very difficult to interpret each component of social distancing and which ones are absolutely critical. Now there's a way to do that in multivariate analysis potentially. Now I want everyone to understand there are states that are testing. There are states that are doing contact tracing. So I mean, I think sometimes we get, we look at what New York is doing and Detroit, and we forget that there's a Utah and a New Mexico and a North and South Dakota and a whole series of states that have been doing testing and contact tracing and have been testing at rates higher than that per capita rate that we all have discussed. So we're looking at that. What did they do? Where are the most vulnerabilities? Where are the outbreaks most likely to occur? And that's why I've been talking about nursing homes, because we do believe that there's a relationship between age and seriousness of disease. Not to say that there can't be young people with serious disease, but proportionally, it's a smaller piece with serious disease. And so when you have that kind of spectrum where the older and the more complicated, the higher the severity, you get the impression that there may be more asymptomatic in younger age groups, and that's where the antibody test comes in. So when you put all these pieces together, you're trying to understand where would be the first signals. So we have surveillance out there right now with the CDC's influenza-like illness. I hope you're all tracking that. It is showing these small changes. I think we can believe in that as a surveillance tool married with their syndromic piece, giving us the insight about where to test and then where to proactively test in nursing homes and other vulnerable groups, because that has been the signal in a series of the states that have very, very low prevalence and incidence of disease. So that's the kind of factors we're putting all together to really define the best way forward. And we have superb roadmaps. I hope you all have seen them. There's been about 6 different roadmaps to opening that people have put online. And again, there's no literature that you can cite and said, well, we did this 20 years ago and what really worked. There isn't that. There's brilliant public health people giving us their insights.
I guess the core of the question is, because those are the models you've been using, if you do go with starting to open up the economy again on May 1st, doesn't that lead to more deaths?
Well, look at how much it changed with mitigation. And now we're looking at those state by state, and there's some states in there that are still in contact tracing. So we're looking at the impact of that model and what that model predicted based on the type of contact tracing, less mitigation, more contact tracing. Are you getting what I'm talking about? Okay, so there are states that didn't stay-at-home orders, but we're doing contact tracing from outbreaks. So we're looking at them and how they have done, and we're looking at certainly what's happened in the big metro areas. And we're integrating all of that data together to make a plan going forward. So I can't tell you, because look at how much the model has changed in just a week. Remember, just a week ago, it was 80,000. Now it's 60,000. So, and the curves, I'm sure you're all watching it, the curves are getting much broader confidence intervals. There is still the dotted line, but the confidence intervals around the dotted line are getting bigger. When you see that, you know the model has a bit of instability. And so that's why Tony and I base a lot of our decision and discussion on cases and what physically is happening in that county and that state. At the same time, not ignoring the models, but integrating the models as one piece of our thought process. Do you want to come up here and say what you think about models? Okay.
Dr. Works, can you update something?
I just want to say that, you talked about couldn't it lead to death, meaning you open up, could lead to death, and you're right. But you know what? Staying at home leads to death also. And it's very traumatic for this country. But staying at home, if you look at numbers, that leads to a different kind of death, perhaps, but it leads to death also. So it's a very big decision. As I say, it's the biggest decision I'll ever make. All right, we'll do a couple of more and we'll go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before you came out here, you said one of the last people that you talked to was Governor Cuomo.
Yes.
And at his news conference today, he said that he was asking you to use the Defense Production Act to require companies to make more tests, to streamline testing. Is that something that you would consider, because you've considered it with ventilators?
Well, the other side seems to keep using that, and I have used it. I've enacted it, you do know, and I've used it. Some people thought viciously. Just ask a couple of companies. If you want, you can just look up the names. And I'm surprised that he would have said that. We actually have great tests. We have others under development. You don't need full testing, as the doctors have been talking about ad nauseum. So I would be surprised that he would have said that, meaning it that way. If he did, I'd have a much different type answer. Go ahead.
You all didn't talk about it over the phone.
We talked about testing. Yeah, we did talk about testing. And one of the things I did was I put the two doctors in charge of that call. I said, you know what, Andrew? I have two very talented people standing here. We're getting ready to go on. Let me put them and let me have them talk to you. And they talked to him really at length. And I think by the time they finished, he understood what we were saying. He understood it very clearly. Okay.
One more question, please. You've talked a lot this week about holding the World Health Organization responsible for its response to the coronavirus. I'm curious if you've given any more thought to holding China financially responsible for the part that it played and the economic toll that it's taking on the American people.
Yeah, I understand the question very well. Look, nobody has done to China or treated China as strongly as I have. Use the word strongly. As you know, you've reported on it. Billions and billions of dollars is flowing into our treasury because of what I've done with China. I think it's a very sad thing that happened. And I think if people knew, including the World Health Organization, and I do believe they knew, but they didn't want to tell the world. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. And we'll have reports on all of this, and we are not happy about it. But I wanted to leave the World Health for later. And I can tell you that we're constantly in touch with China. We're talking to China. And we've expressed how we felt. We're not happy about it. We're not happy about it at all, Kristen. Okay, one or two more? Yeah, Jim.
Mr. President, we hear from a lot of people who see these briefings as sort of happy talk briefings. And
no happy talk today.
You and some of the officials paint a rosy picture of what is happening around the country. If you look at some of these questions, do we have enough masks? No. Do we have enough tests? No. Do we have enough PPE? No.
Why would you say no?
Do we have enough medical equipment?
The answer is yes. I think the answer is yes. Who said no to that?
I'm saying this.
No, you're saying no. But who said no? But you asked me, do we have enough masks?
We hear from
yes.
Doctors, we hear from
No, you didn't say that. You said, do we have enough masks?
Does the country?
Yes. Do we have enough tests? Yes. Plus, we're developing new tests. Do we have enough? Do we have enough ventilators? Yes. Do we have enough hospital beds? Yes. We've built 20,000 hospital beds. We have enough hospital beds. Go ahead, Jim, let's go.
What do you say to, I mean, you watch the coverage.
You know what I
You're
say?
watching a lot of the coverage.
Well, a lot of it's
These
fake news.
doctors who, no,
A lot of it's fake
not-
news. A lot of it's fake news. Let me just
When
tell
the
you.
doctors
The-
and the
the
medical experts come
governors-
on our air
the
and
governors
say that we
reported-
don't have enough tests, we don't have enough
The governor,
masks.
yeah, depending on your air, they always say that, because otherwise you're not going to put them on. Let me just tell you something. The governors have said, last night, they had a group of governors, 14 governors, they were together someplace, and they said, it's been unbelievable what's happened. We've been totally responsive. Ventilators. Everyone has the ventilators they need, to a point where we're getting calls from foreign countries saying, you have all the ventilators, can we get some? And we're going to try and help some of these countries. These people have done an incredible job. This is not happy talk. Maybe it's